Hey guys, I'm Coach Adam. This is another episode of Coach Adam's Bikini TV. Today we are going over the Charolette Pro that happened this weekend. It was an awesome throwdown. Saw some names come back that we haven't seen for a little while. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So top 6 for this show: Alice Roca, which is a little bit of a surprise, Jessica Machado, Ashley Hampton, Brittany Hamilton in third place, which is also a little bit of a surprise, Maria Acosta, which was a little bit of a surprise, and Vanya, Augusta, I guess I say it as Augusta. I should know that's one of my friends. Congrats, Vanya, for this one. That was no surprise. I had her picked as the winner, but I did have it picked going into this show between Vanya and Brittany. So it was a little bit of a surprise that she got down to third place, especially with Maria's track record, which we'll go into. So congrats to Maria for jumping way up on the pro level. You know, she jumped way up from her previous showings. So it was really good to see. Alice Roca, I actually thought going into this show, she'd be in that third spot or so. Everyone knows, how I feel about Alice's physique. I think it's absolutely awesome. And let's go ahead and jump into it and see what happened with this show. So first, going into sixth place with Alice Roca, I thought she would be a little bit higher on the placings when I saw the roster come out. I really would have had her in third, just looking at the roster on its own of competitors, of the known competitors and how they've done. She's had a couple seasons here now. This is her second full season of competing as a pro, and looking at her first pro debut, she came out with a bang. She looked absolutely awesome. Top 5 in that first show. I saw her for the first time. I was like, man, this girl is going places. She looks absolutely awesome. But she's kind of had a staggered career since then, kind of just staying right in that, still getting first call outs, but hasn't been getting those, first places, second places, and moving up. She's kind of been staying stagnant in that, first call out, fifth, sixth place area. And I think that she has the physique and potential to move up. And it's just a few things. At first, when she first was coming out, it was all her posing. Her posing just needed a lot more work. Her physique was there. I didn't see a whole lot needed with her physique. It was really just the posing. The posing was just really off for the pro level. She's fine-tuned her posing. It's gotten a lot better now. I don't even think she's going to get that much posing critiques from the judges at this point. But what I will say is, watching her, there is some posing consistency that might be the bigger issue now, which is when I'm seeing her on the line in the front pose. So when you see her in this front pose, this is a great front pose. She's got wide shoulders. She's got a tiny waistline. Her ratios are crazy. Great glutes. One of the better glute profiles from the front. But one thing I was noticing when watching her in those front poses as she was in the comparisons, there was times where she was standing more straight up and her glutes weren't this poppy in the comparisons. And I pulled some pictures up from the comparisons as well, but you can't really see because she's on the far left and the pictures are very, very small. Not the best because it's all the whole stage, so you can't really see the detail of the glute. But what you could see is sometimes she was standing up a little bit taller, sometimes she was sitting more into her hip, and sometimes she was losing this glute profile. And when she loses that glute profile next to girls with really full glutes in that front pose, and her being a petite competitor, she does look a little bit small comparatively. And I think that hurt her a little bit in this show. I think if she can just work on her consistency of her posing, consistency of her angles as well. Like, for example, her being on the far left, giving the proper angle when you're on the far left is a lot different than being in the center. Being in the center, it's very easy. You don't need to change your posing. You just pose like you're posing to a mirror. Being on the far left, you have to pose like you're at an angle posing to a mirror. And I think that sometimes messes people up when the adrenaline's going and all that. And that's just some stage IQ that she needs to work on there. Now, the other thing is, there's times where she's posing very kind of, you see her shoulders here are kind of slanted. There's times where that happens. And when you're posing kind of slanted, you're pushing into your hips a lot. You're posing slanted with your shoulders at this slant. Well, that shrinks up your overall shoulder width. Your shoulders are naturally going to be wider when they're straight across, and when they're slanted, you're going to lose an inch or two on that width. Now, she's already a petite bikini competitor, and she has no size to give. So that's going to be just a couple things. So her posing originally was like her posing routine, and her flow needed more work. Now it's her posing consistency, changing front to back, changing on the sides, her stage IQ, getting her shoulders straight, and just nailing that posing. So I don't think she needs a ton of muscle, but she does need a little bit more to be competitive in today's. Her conditioning's not bad. I think that just a little bit more size on the legs, a decent amount more on the shoulders. The arms are fine, and then just nail that consistency on the posing, and she's going to be great. When you look at the glutes and you look at the tie-ins, they're pretty much there. I think they could be just a little bit more in terms of, not in conditioning. I don't think she should be any tighter than this, but just a little bit more size is going to help those tie-ins quite a bit. And I think that's what it is. Just a little bit more size, a little bit more detail in the overall, actually a little bit more Gosh, I'm forgetting the word. Density. There you go. So just a little bit more density in these tie-ins here, and they're really going to show through. So not necessarily a ton more size, but a little more density and hardness to those glutes, and they'll show a lot better. So just so she's fine-tuned, I think she's still going to be at the Olympia one day. It might not be this year based on how I'm seeing her come out initially, but maybe she was a little bit flat. You know, a lot of times judges will say, oh, you're flat, and they have no basis of where that competitor is. So you can't always tell if someone is filled out or not. What I can say is she doesn't look entirely flat. She just looks like she just needs more overall size, a little bit more overall fullness. Now, and fullness doesn't mean necessarily you're flat, just more overall, a little bit more overall size, more consistency with her posing. But she's still someone I'm rooting for. I hope that she does get to the Olympia. And I think that she's just the right peak away, the right show away for her. And I actually thought there was a good chance at this show, considering the names that were there, that she could potentially step up and beat everyone there. But it wasn't her day. Now, in 5th place, we have Jessica Machado, and I do think that Jessica beats Alice today, and I want to go into why. So, a couple things with Jessica. Now, the one thing I will say is 5th place and 6th place, some of the biggest improvements they can both make is going to be their posing. You'll keep hearing this, posing. How you present for your physique is going to be very unique to that person, and I would say both of them can use work. Now, I already went over what Alice could work on her overall posing. Now we're going to go ahead and go into what Jessica can work on. Now, one of the things I will say about Jessica is that she is posing really arched in this front pose. You see how arched she is? The problem with this is she's not a very tall competitor, and this really shrinks up her torso. So when you're pushing really hard in this hip and you have a big arch to your back, great. It's great for the glute profile. It's going to be an awesome pose, awesome for your glute profile. But if you're doing it and it shrinks your torso this much where everything looks super compacted, well, it makes your waistline look a little wider. You're going to have a little bit of a ripple here on your lower back where the skin kind of folds around the suit. She's actually not having, which is really lucky for that. But her torso is quite a bit shrunken, you know. So I think she should be standing a little taller. I think she'll still have great glutes if she's standing a little taller, but it's going to help her overall balance from upper to lower body. When you're in these, 5-inch heels, it's going to make look at how much longer. So the top of her hip is this long already because of these, longer heels. So that when we talk about upper and lower, right, her hips, the top of her hips go right there. Like how much more is her torso? We're talking the legs are already, 3/4 basically with a shorter girl, 3/4 of her overall body length. It's the legs because of those heels. And then if you're pushing harder into this back pose and shrinking your upper body even more because you're arching so much trying to get these glutes, the exchange isn't worth it. It's not worth getting that a little bit more glute profile and losing 2 to 3 inches on your torso when you're a shorter competitor and you have these really long legs that are exaggerated because of the heels, right? So stand up taller. It's better to be standing up taller and helping your overall upper to lower body balance than it is to get just a little bit more of that glute profile, right? I don't think it's a fair exchange. Sometimes the exchange is worth it. I'll pose people differently based on torso lengths, based on height, change heel height, things like that to try to balance everything out a little more. Because remember, bikini is about balance too. So it's balance, muscle, conditioning, beauty, all these different factors that go into bikini. But balance is one of them, and that means everything, right? So how hard you're posing is going to be one of them. Now, the other thing I don't love about her posing is how far this arm is out and how her arm is opened up. It's a little bit of an older style posing. We did that a little while back when we were worried about lat flares. Obviously, we're not worried about lat flares anymore, and the arm should be just basically coming straight down off your side, looking basically as comfortable and as natural as possible. That was a bad line there. So a little bit closer here to your side. So you don't need to be doing this arm out thing to get your lat out. That's what a lot of girls are doing. You saw this happen a lot where they're doing this kind of teacup thing. This isn't a full teacup, but the arm is out. It's not a relaxed arm at your side. And you'll notice that in the upper placings, most of the girls are going to have that arm out at the side. Now, we talked about with Alice with that straight shoulder balance. The balance is there on her shoulders. It's even and straight, and she looks wider because of that. Her overall muscle and everything she has, honestly, physique is awesome. Doesn't really need much of the physique at all. The physique is great. Pose it a little bit differently. Get with a good posing coach who's going to work on your balance of how hard you're pushing in that front pose. Get this arm to be more relaxed at your side. In this back pose, it's pretty much perfect. When you look at that, when you look at the tie-ins, you don't need any more conditioning than that. Nice roundness to the hamstrings without any crazy separation. The glutes are nice and full. They have good glute medius here on that upper outer edge of the glute. Suit cut is good. Everything really good. A lot of poppy colors. That green is a really contrasty color. Tan is good. Hair is good, but the hair is a little long. You see how the hair is like right on her glutes? I don't like anytime the hair covers that lower back. I want to see just a little bit of the lower back. And again, this happens because of the arch. One, her hair is long, but two, because she's so far arched, again, it shrinks your torso, and now your hair lays longer on your lower body. The more you're arched, the longer your hair is going to lay, which is not a problem if her hair wasn't touching your glutes. But I would shorten that hair up a little bit, because if you can get just a little bit of that hair gone, you can see that lower back, the glutes look even bigger, because the starting reference point of the lower back is farther away. So if you have your glutes here, but your hair is here, the glutes don't look like they're projecting as much. But if your glutes are here, and the hair is cut, and your lower back is here, now the glutes look like they're projecting more. It's all an illusion, of course. Nothing changes with the actual physique. But if you can get even just a little bit of an advantage at this pro level, do it, And I think that that's going to be a thing. Now, the other thing is, with her posing in the back pose, I can see her pinkies. I can see her pinkies and her fingers. Shouldn't be able to see any of your hands in that back pose. The only thing I should see is like the top of your bracelets here. But the hands, you shouldn't see the hands. So put the hands a little bit more on the inside and make sure that the judges can't see them. This is a straight back shot, so that means her pinkies are actually outside of her quad lines, right? So that would be something I would go against. That's just a little thing. But overall, with her physique, I don't think she needs a big change on her overall physique. On her posing, I think she does. Conditioning-wise is good. I don't think that really anything needs to be there. She's full, she's conditioned. It's just posing a little bit differently, a little bit of those stage things that make a big difference. So if she did all those things, would she have moved up a couple spots? Maybe. Not sure, but it definitely wouldn't hurt. All right, in fourth place, we have Ashley Hampton. So Ashley Hampton, really, really great physique. There's some fine-tuning she can do on her physique to make this incredible Olympia-level physique. But let's go ahead and go into it. And if you notice, I have 3 pictures with Ashley, and she's got a little bit of work to do on her physique, on her balance from front to back, right? So you don't hear this too often, but a front to back difference is going to be the biggest thing for her. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's go ahead and look. So if we look at her overall stage package, when we talk about her hair, her makeup, her suit color, I think it's great. I don't think she really needs anything to change anything here. The suit cut is good. I mean, everything's pretty solid here. I wouldn't really change anything. It was a good overall presentation. But when we look at her arm again. We just talked about the teacupping, right? Now that would be a full teacupping. They would call that a teacupping. Most judges would knock that down. So that would be another scenario here. If you keep seeing the trend, the posing is such a huge factor, guys. Get yourselves with some good posing coaches that really know the sport. That's going to be one of the more important things. I have very few selected, approved posing coaches that they come to posing classes with me. They learn. I go to every show. I analyze every show, see what's trending and changing in the posing before they can pose our girls. So Phoebe is an awesome one. Obviously worked with Phoebe for years on posing, one of the better in the world. If you just book honestly, a lot of you, if you just booked one session with her, you'd be great. Kimber poses our girls. Tori poses our girls. Courtney, we have some really great posing coaches here that we can help you with. Sam as well. So we have our next posing class Saturday, May 6th. It's free if you guys are in Las Vegas. 10 o'clock followed by a glute camp, 11:30. The posing class is absolutely free. You can come if you're from any team. So, take advantage of posing classes in your area. If you're in Vegas, come on out to ours. But that's going to be one of the bigger things. You keep seeing this being a trend, and this whole thing wasn't a trend like a setup to get you to come to my posing class, because I don't make any money on it. It's free. But that's the thing. Even at the pro level, you see these girls making these mistakes. This one would be considered a full teacup in the arm, okay? So what we want to do is have this arm nice and relaxed at your side, just kind of hanging down. Now, you can cheat it a little bit and have a tiny bit of the lat to flare out, just a little bit of we call like a kiss of lat to show us some V-taper. But they don't want to see a big lat. They don't want to see you pushing it out and shoving your shoulders up and high like this or anything like that. So as far as her overall shoulders, she's putting them in a good position. They're not in a bad position. It's just this arm doesn't need to be out like that. And the judges are going to recognize that as teacupping. That's something that they were very, very big against a couple years ago. And so you're seeing a couple girls here and there do it again, but the judges still remember they put out a public notification, stop teacupping. They did it like they full on did diagrams of it and said, stop doing this, right? So that'll be an easy correction for her to fix. Now, one of the harder corrections for her to fix, and this is going to be a tough one for any coach to get there to figure out, and this is why I have 3 pictures of her pulled up. When you look at the density of her quad, that is a very, very dense quad. That is a lot of muscle on that quad. That would fall into the lines of not being a bikini quad. the density on that quad is extreme. And you're going to have to tone it down on that quad if you're going to want to move up in the ranks. Remember, we talk about pretty muscle. If you look at Maureen, you are not going to see any of this density like that in Maureen. Maureen is the standard for bikini. Whoever wins the Olympia is the standard. Look at Jennifer Dory the year prior. Again, you didn't see any of this crazy density, this hardness to the muscle here. We want pretty muscle. That's all we want. So pretty muscle would be, a good full muscle without any of that deep detail. This would be considered deep detail, a lot of hardness to the muscle, a lot of graininess to the muscle, actually. So be careful with that. You could see it even on the back leg here, starting to get some extreme detail on that back leg and vascularity through the leg. Is that a conditioning thing? I don't know. Now, here's going to be the hard part with Ashley is that the backside is significantly different than the front side. Look at how hard and dense the front quad is versus the hamstring and glute on the back, right? That is an imbalance. And I used to have a bodybuilder that was like that. I had a bodybuilder that used to have striated glutes and striated hamstrings, and it would confuse me as a coach. I was like, man, he's in shape, but then his front wouldn't be in shape, right? I'm like, okay, I got to just ignore that his glutes and his hamstrings are striated, because that's usually the last thing that comes in on most people is their glutes and hamstrings being striated, right? The glutes especially. That's like the very last thing on a bodybuilder to come in is the glutes and the lower back. So it was confusing to me. It's like, okay, I think he's in detail. He's in shape, but he's technically not in shape. So I'm just going to ignore the glutes because that's really confusing me. And she's kind of like that as a bikini pro, right? I'm like, okay, she's in great shape, but she can still be a little bit tighter on the backside. So how do you bring her in a tiny bit tighter on the backside with controlling the density on the front side? Is it going to be a posing scenario? Is it just that she needs more overall muscle on the back? Does she need to stop working her quads entirely to soften them up a little bit, but then work her glutes and hamstrings a little bit more for a little bit longer, get them denser to match the front and back balance, right? So that's going to be the biggest issue as she moves up the ranks and runs into tougher competition. At this show, considering who was competing in this, there was some pretty muscular girls that have some more detail, but at a show, at like a higher level show, like an Olympia level show or an Arnold level show where you're getting a lot of that pretty muscle girl, she'll keep climbing and maybe win a pro show and then get to that level and then be like, why can't I do good at this level? And that's going to be why. It's just going to be so obvious when you're next to those girls. So instead of figuring it out once you get there, figure it out now and climb your way there and be competitive on that level. And that's where I'm always kind of on the judges for these things, is because when you reward something that is not going to be rewarded at the upper levels, you're sending the wrong message. So that's why I was so hard on the Esther pick in the UK. She was way too hard to be competitive at a high level coming into a Olympia, coming into an Arnold, because that's not, but you're rewarding her and telling her this is how you win, when in reality, that's not going to be how you win. And so the judging needs to be consistent all the way through at every single show, at every single level, so we can give the right message to even NPC athletes. Like, okay, you might win here, but you're not going to win here. So instead of saying you might win here, how about we just pick the girl that's going to win on every level, right? Because the conditioning is going to be the biggest thing. So a little bit of work for her. I think it's probably going to be about a 6-month fix to really figure these things out. It's going to be a harder one. It's going to take a very skilled practitioner to work on that balance and get those two things figured out, but a very workable physique. It's just going to take some time for her. And I can see with her lines and her structure and her flow, like she could be a very good competitor, just has to finish some fine tuning now at this point. In third place, we have Brittany Hamilton. Now, this was a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought she was going to be one of the front runners, and I thought the lowest she would possibly place would be second. I thought it was going to be a battle between her and Vanya. So I was a little bit surprised by her. And when I'm seeing her physique, still a little bit surprised by her because her physique looks on point. There's not a whole lot to work on for her overall physique. Her fullness was definitely pushed in this one. Maybe that was the reason she placed a little bit lower, but let's go ahead and break it down. So I've been beating everyone up on their posing, not intentionally. It's just obvious that in the 4 through 6 positions, posing was something that needed to be worked on. With Brittany, though, I don't really have anything to say about her posing. Her posing is pretty much solid. I don't think there's really any errors here. Typically when I'm seeing someone, I would say they need to pose a little wider with their shoulders. You can see she's not giving her full width on her shoulders, but in her scenario, she's very shouldery. She's got a lot of shoulders. I think I did a review on her last year where I was like, her shoulders are a little bit too much. How she's posing them here, they don't look too much at all. So she seems to be posing for balance, right? And that's what I keep saying. Everyone's posing is going to be different based on their structure, based on their attributes. If you have really, really big shoulders, then yeah, pose them a little bit not as wide. You don't need them to be as wide when everyone around you isn't as wide. If you have a lot of density to their shoulders, yeah, lower your hand position. Look at how low her hand position is here. The higher her hand position is up on her waistline, the more capping it's going to show, right? The more detailed it's going to show. So this posing for her, I think, is great. And I think it's funny because I've posed people weird ways and then everyone's like, oh, she's posing wrong. And I'm like, no, that just tells me you don't know anything about the sport because you think there's a right way to pose the front pose. There's a right way for each person to front pose, but there is not only one right way. Okay. So for her, I would say this is the right way for her to pose. If she had smaller shoulders, I would say this is the wrong way for her to front pose. I would tell her to roll her shoulders over a little bit more, open them up a tiny bit. But yeah, she's doing everything right. But look at her arm. It's slightly out, but it's in that relaxed position. And that's what we talked about here is just having it in that just nice relaxed position. She still has a little bit of her V taper showing, a little bit of her lats showing. Overall shape looks really good. You could tell that they went for overall fullness versus conditioning on this one. And I think that is potentially what hit her. You could see there's just a little bit of softness in her core, maybe just a little bit too full, a little bit spilled potentially, or, and I can't tell if she's a little bit spilled or a little bit off on her conditioning, but a little bit soft when it comes to that. So these days we're pushing the fullness, we're pushing that overall more full look. Maybe they went for it this one, especially considering Vanya was the front runner and Vanya is a very muscular competitor. And maybe just went a little bit too far with that. It's hard to nail this. You're never going to nail every single time. You want to nail it a couple times a year, the Olympia, the Arnold, something like that. If you look at when I'm prepping Ashley, when she does 10 shows, we'll probably nail it 6 of the 10 shows. So no one's going to nail it 100%. It's just really hard to do, especially when you're at these smaller shows and you're trying new things. This year, they're going for a very full look. So maybe you're trying for pushing more carbs. But the good thing is you're trying. Never just get stuck and say, okay, this is the only look. This is the only look. They only like me this way. Because that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for not climbing. But I like that she's taking risks. I like that she's pushing the carbs and being open to it. Even if this time it missed a little bit, maybe it was a little bit too much. Maybe I'm wrong on that. And she just wasn't in condition. She'll be better conditioned at the next show. But to me, it looks like I would go with, it looks like they filled and spilled just a little bit here. But I admire the push for taking risks. I'm a big risk taker myself. If I'm not finishing first, but I'm taking risks and I finish last, I'm happy with that. Whatever it takes to get closer to first. Getting third, these days, it doesn't matter, we're going for first place. So whatever it takes, if we take a risk and it backfires and you get last place, hey, at least we know now we got that data. It's too much, but it's better than, just squeezing by safely and getting fourths and fifths and thirds. Like, go for the win, and I think that that's what they did. This year at the Olympia, it's win and you're in. There's no point system. So I admire it. So I say keep going for it. You're going to nail the look this time a little bit too much. Now, the other thing I will go into with her overall look, I do think that the suit can be just a little bit lower on her glutes. I think it would help her overall glute shape a tiny bit if it wasn't so high on her lower back. I think the bikini should outline your glutes a little bit. And I think it's just a little bit off of outlining your glutes. It's a little bit too high. You see how you can see the whole upper top part of the glute? I think that this should be just a little bit more like that. And it would round out her glutes a tiny bit more. And obviously this is a terrible drawing because this thing is like skipping all over the place today. But you see how it's basically off of her glutes? If you look here, it's off of her glutes on that top part. There is a gap between the top of her glute, her lower back, and the suit. That should be right on the top part of the glutes and accentuating the glutes, not exposing that this is where the glutes stop. Because the glutes will look actually bigger if you have a line of suit on top of the glute there. It kind of leaves a little bit to the imagination in terms of, oh, that glute is probably bigger versus it just stopping right there, right? So it looks like it's a fuller glute when you do that. So that's the only error I would say on her overall presentation. But honestly, it's a pretty impressive package. So I wouldn't change too much here. In second place, we have Maria Acosta. So who is Maria Acosta, right? That's what I was thinking going into this show. I didn't know who she was. Last year, her pro debut season, she got the highest placing she got was 5th place. She got some 10th places and, she did 4 shows last year and her highest was 5th. Then she comes back in 2023 and her first show in, she gets 2nd place. So that's the thing about bikini, guys. You never know who the next star is going to be. You never know. You look at a list and you don't know a lot of the names and you're like, you overlook them. just understand at one point, everyone was just a name on a list, right? When Ashley came out, she won her first show. No one knew who she was either, right? She won a show. They're like, okay, whatever. She's a new pro. And she goes and wins the show, right? So this happens all the time. And when you look at a show list, it's like you'll overlook names. And that's what I did at this show. I was like, okay, it's going to be between Vanya and Brittany. And then I didn't know who Maria was, But looking at her overall physique as she got, I was like, man, how did someone edge out Brittany that I have no idea who they are? And it's one of those scenarios where it's this pro that finally hit their stride. They're starting to really hit it. They're really studying the sport. They took the right off amount of time they needed to balance out their physique and look the way they needed to look. But this physique is very, very pretty muscle, and that's the thing I was talking about. When I keep bringing up Maureen and pretty muscle, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. So if you want to compare just the quad, so let's look at the quad. And if you compare this quad to Ashley, who got fourth place, you could see what I'm seeing now in terms of the density of the quads. So there's a significant difference in the overall density of the quads between the two. And you can kind of see here where we're talking about pretty muscle, right? So that pretty muscle where there's not a lot of detail, there's not a lot of grain to the muscle. You could really see here what I'm speaking of when I talk about the pretty muscle. So when we look at that detail and we look at Maureen, this is more so the Maureen type of muscle. Hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm saying now, because this is a clear example of dense, too much density to the muscle, too much detail, versus a round, pretty bikini muscle where there's a little bit of what we call pretty muscle, right? So this should be a good example. And if she brought this type of muscle, she would have probably moved way up. But that's going to be the difference between, what we call pretty muscle, bikini muscle, and this is bordering on, honestly, this is even bordering, they might even give her something for that in figure being too dense. I don't know. This is a pretty dense muscle on that quad here. And so if you could see, that's going to be the difference. So let's say, for example, I keep pulling up the UK show because it was just a really great example. Esther had this much conditioning, this much detail. Now, if she competes against all girls who look like this at the Olympian Arnold, she's going to clearly stand out as being too much. And that's the problem, is that's where they realize, oh, it was too much, is when they go to these bigger shows, when they're rewarded for being too much in a smaller show, right? So that's why I think consistency of judging is so, so important. And this is exactly what we should be looking for. This is what the example is set to us as Maureen. And I want you guys to see the difference between the two too when you're getting ready for a show. It's definitely harder to look like this. This is going to be, if we're talking about who's got a technically better physique in terms of more development, more muscle, more conditioning, Ashley here would have the better physique, the more experience, the harder to achieve physique, right? But it doesn't mean that it's better in terms of winning for the criteria, and that's the difference. Okay, so back to Maria and her overall flow. It's very, very good. When we look at the upper body to lower body balance, when we look at the shoulder width, the beautiful V taper, the tiny waistline from the back, the roundness of the glutes, the tie-ins being there but not etched, the hamstrings having a little bit of detail, being round but full without any crazy striations, the quad having that pretty muscle, which I've gone over 100 times now, the core being super tight without being peeled, without blocky abs. There's not a whole lot she needs to work on. Her shoulders are pushing it. They're very round, but her clavicle width, her overall clavicle width naturally isn't huge. So I agree with her shoulders being as developed as they are because she doesn't have that wide Janet Leyew clavicle width, right? So this is probably about as far as she can go without them starting to look too crazy. Arm development's there, but it's not too much. Nice capping to the shoulder without any detail separation. This is a really good physique. There's not going to be a whole lot to work on this physique here, but there's going to be ways to position her posing to be a little bit better to complete this package and to make it look a little bit more balanced. And that's going to be the thing with her. It's going to be, okay, get in front of the judges more, get some feedback from the judges, start doing the reps, start working on your physique. The one thing I will say to balance out her physique a little bit more from upper to lower body, I would love to see just a tiny bit more V taper on that lat in that front pose, but really not a whole lot more. Posing is pretty solid. I mean, her stage look is pretty solid. This is a very good package. You could tell that this is someone who's been pro for a little while. They've kind of reset their gameplay. They looked at reset the drawing board, I guess you'd say, and made some serious improvements and came to this show 100% prepared, 100% studied, and is very close to the criteria here of using Maureen as an example. A physique like this, if she was compared to Maureen at a show like that, was at an Arnold where there's a lot of that pretty muscle, where you have an Ashley Caldwell, or you have a Maureen, you have a Laura Lee, like she wouldn't stand out in a bad way at all. She would be right there in terms of the muscle, the balance, the pretty muscle. It wouldn't look different, right? If you took those four and added in Esther from the UK's look, it would look like a different level, different competition. Look like she would be from a different sport, right? Playing in that same competition. And so this is what we talk about, sticking to the criteria and nailing it. She did a very good job. Honestly, there's an argument for her being in first place at this show. It's a tough one on how I would like to see a little bit more of her posing on stage to see if I would have leaned that way. But I was really close to giving her the win personally. And now we go to our winner, Vanya Auguste. Vanya, tell me how to say your last name. So now we go to our winner, Vanya. Now, I've been friends with Vanya for a few years now. I remember seeing her at her pro debut. And at her pro debut, I want to say it was 3 years ago, if I'm right. It might be 4 at this point. I talked to her backstage and I was like, yeah, you look great, but your quads are overdeveloped. That was the thing with her. And if you look back at those pictures, I think it was in Vegas, either 3 or 4 years ago. And they were a little overdeveloped. That was the feedback she got too. The next year I saw her, she came back, I saw her and she was tanning and I was like, Vanya, your quads are a lot better this year. They look a lot more aligned. Like you've restructured them and you've taken time and you've really molded them into the bikini physique. She's like, I've been working so hard to get my quads down and they were a little bit overpowering. You're right on that. And now it's just another year of fine tuning. So we're at least at 3 years fine tuning now, might be 4, since her pro debut of getting that feedback. And they are really along lines with where they need to be. Now, the good thing is for her 4 years ago, they definitely didn't want a lot of quad. Now, 4 years later, they do want a little bit more quad. So as she was coming down, the division was kind of coming up a little bit. And so she kind of met him right in the middle. Now she's at that perfect spot of muscle, and she did a great job. I don't think she needs to change anything on her legs here. Now, the reason that I think she beats Maria is honestly it comes down to the waistline. Her waistline is tiny in this front pose. Her waistline looks awesome. And again, when we talked about Maria, I wanted to see more of that overall lat and more V-taper from Maria. And we're seeing the V-taper that we're talking about from Vanya here too. Now, the shoulders are very comparable. The waistline, Vanya wins. The lat, Vanya wins. The overall V-taper and shape, Vanya wins. From the front on the lower body, there's not a real big difference in terms of the density and pretty muscle. I would actually have Maria winning in terms of the pretty muscle on the leg here. But when we talk about the roundness and fullness of the glute from the front pose and the roundness of the hamstring, I would give it to Vanya. The waistline, I have to give it to Vanya by a pretty far margin. And then the other thing too is we talk about the posing, right? That's the one thing on Vanya. Again, this arm is coming out a little bit far. I get that she's trying to open up her lats a little bit without showing that she's opening up her lats a little bit. When you pose in bikini, you want to kind of have a little bit of lat showing without looking like you're opening the lat. Like you want to have a tiny bit of lat, but you don't want to be looking like you're like this. So a lot of times you'll get this more extended arm out. So I think she could do the same V-taper and get that V-taper without her arm being so extended. Not by a lot though, just by a little bit. I guess it's not very far off. A few inches down on the arm would make it look more natural. And that's what you want to look like in bikini, just like it's naturally just sitting there. That's how you stand. And that would be a huge help to her. Now, the other thing is with her suit is okay. It's not bad at all. I don't think it creates a lot of good contrast. I think honestly, part of this is she kind of got a little bit screwed with the suit color because it matches the background. And that really does hurt you when you have a blue background and a blue suit. It kind of blends in a little bit. So I don't know if that's what my eye is seeing. It's not catching, but on her skin tone, I would go with a lighter color suit. I think it'll create more contrast. It's not a bad one, but I think with all these crystals too, it doesn't help with the overall contrast look. I think the background doesn't help at all with her overall contrast look. And that's the thing. If you're at a very high level and you're getting free suits, like I'm assuming she's a sponsored athlete by some suit company, and you have all these free suits, bring different suits, because if you find out there's a blue background and you got a blue suit, you want to create some contrast. And that could be, we're talking high IQ bikini stuff here. But if she had a green suit or something bright, even like a bright color, a pink suit, a yellow suit, like just a different color suit that would create some contrast. Even a turquoise suit would pop here. So a brighter color for your skin tone And also in the scenario of like a pro level, if you happen to have an extra suit and you bring, you see there's a blue suit with a blue background. Yeah, pick a different color suit to create that more pop and that more wow factor. Now that's something that's going to be it's kind of one of those things that's judged, but it's not judged, right? It's kind of like, why are the judges staring at me more? Well, it's because you have more contrast and you just pop more and the judges catch your eye. A judge is never going to say, oh, you should have picked a different suit for the background, but they're not going to realize, why did I notice her more than someone else? Well, there was that contrast there, and that's why I noticed her more. And all these little things add up. So yeah, this is some level 10 advanced bikini stuff, but why not have 2 suits? You get them for free anyway, right? Bring that just in case. Now, with her overall physique from the back, honestly, there is not really anything to do here from the back. I would probably tell her not to do anything from the back, to be honest. This is a pretty complete back shot. Shoulders are nice and wide, nice and capped. Not too much arm development. It's pushing it. In bikini these days, they're pushing it. There's no denying that. The V-taper, I would like to see a little bit of more V-taper from the back, but not a lot. I don't want her doing an open lat spread, but she has these beautiful lats. I would like to see just a tiny bit more shape from the back. Not a lot, just a tiny bit. Honestly, the back pose, nothing to change here. I mean, the tie-ins are there without being etched in. We don't want etched in tie-ins. We just want to see the full shape of the tie-in without them being etched in. The roundness of the hamstring is there without the separation. I mean, it's pretty much pushing it right to the limit without going over the top. And I do think she beats Maria from the back as well. So that's why she ends up winning. I was really close like Maria. And then the thing about Vanya, she has really, really good stage presence. Like, even if it was close, she's probably like the best poser there on stage at that show, that I could, from the names that I saw. So I think that was going to be a huge help for her. So yeah, congrats Vanya on getting to the Olympia. Always happy when like one of my buddies gets to the Olympia. So I was really happy about that, seeing her there. She's a great person. So anyway, with that is a wrap up. Congrats again to Vanya, another person qualified for the Olympia. Let me know in the comment section if you think the judges got this one right. TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide online contest prep and transformations. And until next time, I'm out.